welcome back to another edition of GNet TV's In-Depth Series. I'm Andrew McKeever, and it's March 5th, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today, and also a great pleasure to be joined by two guests here in our studio. State Representative Rob Hunter is with us, along with State Senator Rob Plunkett, and they're here to give us a sort of a mid-session town meeting week update on how things have been going in the legislature so far. Still a couple more months to get to go, but both of you are newcomers to the legislature, right? First terms for both of you, so congratulations on that. And I guess we'll just start. And Rob, why don't we?
Sure.
Rob Hunter, why don't we? This is going to be fun.
Yeah, we get the Robs today. Yeah.
The two Robs. Have you got us started here by just saying, telling us, how things have been going? What's it been like
Just
as
generally
a freshman in the legislature?
It's fine. No, it's
be careful.
Okay, so here I am on the. Okay, so just generally speaking, it's been very interesting and informative. Definitely a new kind of job. Whenever you start a new job, there's always that's you're in a dark room looking for the light switch kind of feeling, and and the people who've been there are going 100 miles an hour. And at one freshman meeting I have on Fridays, people were talking about all the different things they were doing. I thought, how do you have time? And they're all newcomers too, but then I realized they're not on the education committee.
Oh,
So, but there's an awful lot going on. It's a very interesting experience. I mean, I think that we kind of all know a little bit about our state government, but it's very interesting to be there and really seeing how it works day to day. Yeah.
I bet.
So generally speaking, interesting, informative, energizing.
And a lot of work, I would imagine.
Yes.
And Senator Plunkett, what's been your take on it so far?
Yeah, well, it's going great, but on certain days, I think perhaps like Rob, if you'd asked me that, I would say, yeah, this is not going well. And in fact, there was one day when someone asked me, how are you liking it? And I was like, I hate it. And I'll just be honest. There was a day where just everything was just not going the way it should go. But most days, I'm really loving it. And it started out with a little bit of a surprise for me because, as you know, and I think most folks know, I'm a lawyer, I'm a prosecutor, so everyone kind of expected I get to the Senate and I'm going to be on the Judiciary Committee. And as they were reading off the appointments to the different committees, I was listening and expecting be down to Judiciary, and then I heard my name after Agriculture, which is in the morning when Judiciary appears, which was a surprise to me. It was such a surprise that I didn't hear my next committee assignment. And just to give you sort of a little background on how the Senate works, there are 30 of us, and we each have two committees. Or standing committees, one in the morning and then one in the afternoon. My morning committee is the Agriculture Committee, and I have no background in agriculture. So a lot of what I've been doing is just learning a lot from a lot of farmers that have been coming through. And I got to say that the chair, Senator Engels, he's been fantastic on really getting folks to teach a brand new committee. And my afternoon committee is institutions, which historically had dealt with just almost exclusively what's called the Capitol Bill, which is upkeep and purchasing of state buildings. This year, we're going to be dealing with corrections as well, which I do have a little bit of a background on. But we're also dealing with information technology. So we have three pretty big topics in this afternoon committee. So a lot of what I've been doing is learning a lot of things from each of these groups, and I was also appointed to other joint committees, the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which I think is perfect for a lawyer because people's eyes glaze over with that, and I was
Right.
very happy to be on that. But I'm also on the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee, and I forget the exact name of it because we haven't met. It usually meets over the summer, but the Joint Judicial Oversight Committee, I believe, is what it's
Okay.
called. So I'm on a number of committees. So there was a lot of things to deal with. So when Rob was mentioning before, how do you have the time? Well,
Yeah.
that's a lot of what I've been thinking about too. Because even though we aren't necessarily dealing with the bills, especially not the education bills, we're dealing with a lot of different topics day in and day out. And I've been telling folks, at least for me, a lot of in the Senate kind of feels like college, where you've got your morning class and I'm learning all of this stuff, and then might have a joint assembly, which would be the Senate floor, and then my afternoon class of institutions, and I'm vice chair of institutions.
Oh, wow.
My chair is Wendy Harrison. She's the senator in Brattleboro, who's doing a fantastic job there as well. But in short, to answer how it's going, that's how it's going.
All right. Well, it all sounds interesting. Let's dive in. I mean, obviously, what probably most people have been paying attention to when they think about the legislature this year so far is the education proposal that Governor Scott unveiled back in January. And I know, Rob, you were at a forum in Arlington on Sunday, and you and Kathleen James, your seatmate, spent a lot of time talking about that, and I'm sure you've both been to other meetings during town meeting week where you've had to describe what that bill entails. I guess I just wondered, what is your sense of the likelihood we're going to wind up with something pretty close to what the governor's outlined so far when we get to the finish line and the bill actually gets to his desk? Is it going to be, the rather dramatic overhaul? It sounds like they're thinking about reducing the number of school districts from, 119 down to 5 large regional ones,
Right.
and really overhauling how the state pays for education.
Right.
Those seem to be the two main
Yep.
factors in play here.
So I guess your original question was, how close will we get to the governor's plan? I think that most people agree that something needs to change, right? We're in this 200-year knot that we've tied ourselves in. That things need to be streamlined. That somehow figuring out how to pay for all this, or at least the challenge of the rising year after year, the rising costs, that these challenges need to be met. I think everybody agrees with that. Now, there's been an awful lot of discussion about, well, maybe it should be 10 districts, maybe it should be by county, that maybe it should be by career technical education centers, right? And I think there are maybe 14 of those, or maybe more. So there's, and I can tell you, like, for these last 2 months, it's been, I only have one committee, but we've been listening to testimony for hours a day. I mean, you name it, the superintendents, the school boards. Zoe Saunders coming in, it's been a revolving door, and it's I think that, and there have been days where I've just thought, like, Rob, what am I doing? Well, like, are you kidding? I can't believe I signed on for this. And so but there's just been so much coming in, it's the proverbial drinking from the fire hose. And, and this landed last week. This is the governor's almost 200-page proposal, bill. Up to this point, it's just been talk. It's literally just been talk. And we haven't seen legislative language until a couple days ago. And so, I mean, I could easily imagine big changes. But here's the thing, and as Kathleen and I have pointed out at all of our meetings, and I had a meeting at the Long Trail School this morning, they're very concerned about what comes next. Arlington's very concerned about what comes next. Burton is very concerned with it. So, and Sunderland's very concerned. And so all of our towns here have a stake in this, a big stake in this, and could potentially be big losers if if this were to be as is. So I think what we're going to see is an awful lot of pressure to find a middle ground, like to somehow create something new that is reasonable. You know, we've had choice here for so long in these areas, and honestly, Burton, I know it's the public school. We all know that, and so. You know, in Long Trail, I think 190 of their 260 students are, you know, town tuitioned in, the vast majority of their kids. So, you know, all of our schools are serving a big and important population. And as I said, they're looking at potentially being big losers if this were to go through. So I think that there's going to be a lot of pressure. I think that I'm finally getting my legs under me, and I think that next week when we go back to work, I will be able to say in my committee, this does not work for my people. This will not work for my people. And, you know, I might be the only voice on that committee saying that, although I know that there's another retired teacher from the Northeast Kingdom, and she says where she comes from, they don't have an elementary school, and all those kids go to an independent school. Mm-hmm. So enter Senator Bongartz is working on his own plan in the Senate, Ed, where, you know, he's trying to figure out a different kind of map with fewer districts, but I hope districts that will preserve at least the towns who do this, from the Northeast Kingdom through the middle of the state, through us right here, where we could actually be able to exist the way we do exist. So, but you can see already it's a tightrope because, well, if you don't change anything, how are you going to save any money, right? But literally, if some of the things happen in here that he's talking about, you know, student-teacher ratios of 1 to 25, high school, middle school, pre-K to 4, like 1 to 15, and you get rid of however many, 40, let's say 40 superintendents, you know, what will the savings be? What will the loss be? Well, I want to say the chair of the Ways and Means last Friday said we'll lose about half of the teachers and staff if this were to happen the way it is written here. So you're looking at 9,000 people losing jobs.
Okay, well, I want to come back to that point in a moment, but Senator Plunkett, your constituency is all of Bennington County.
All of Bennington County and 4 other towns that are in Windham County. So the education spectrum over the entire Senate district ranges from everything, and I think it's unique to Vermont. There's similar in the Northeast Kingdom of how the public, independent, sort of very rural towns and larger districts are mixed. So in a lot of ways, Bennington is the Bennington Senate district, including Londonderry and Wilmington. Stratton and Somerset are included in there, much smaller, obviously, but is really the knot that is going to have to be untied in some ways. And I'm distanced from this. I haven't been listening to all of the testimony. I'm hearing it sort of on the periphery. My committees really won't be dealing with it. Perhaps some school construction in institutions, but that won't come for a while. But from my perspective and hearing the proposals that have been put forward, and I guess we'll say first of all, big proposal put forward. No actual language for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I was terribly disappointed. I wanted to have that day one on the ground so that we get into the nitty-gritty, so it wouldn't be dumped on us, you know. And I didn't understand how important town meeting week was until the last few weeks when everyone was telling me how important it was. So that, because we don't have the answers to the questions now, but there's a lot of uncertainty. I could say for my part, I don't believe that the governor's plan works for us, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to find out another plan, whether it's making major tweaks to, well, major overhauls to the governor's plan, or something else entirely. And Rob had mentioned that Seth, Senator Bongartz, has been working on. He doesn't have his own bill, but he's working on his own ideas on this. And I think for our district, he's very well placed for that. He's the chair of the Senate Education Committee. The Senate Education Committee is made up of 6 senators, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. So it's made to be a bipartisan committee to work through this. And I mentioned earlier that I had been put on the Agriculture Committee. I can kind of go into the details of how the committees are chosen, but and I don't know for sure, but I'm wondering if there might have been some politics behind it, because I didn't make the choice. But if I was a sacrifice to have Senator Bongartz as the chair on education, then it's a happy sacrifice I'm making, because having our senator be the chair of that committee is going to bring his knowledge and also his representation of all of the county, and the county is different from the South, is very different from the North, both in terms of the school structures as well as what everyone had been talking about was, hey, we don't want to pay property taxes that are so jump so crazily each year, but some of our districts, it wasn't as bad. Manchester, I think, was the worst in terms of the district, and this disparity across that in terms of the impact of it is what I'm hoping, and it feels like this year we're going to be able to deal with that at least for 1 year, where I'm hearing in the Senate that in terms of the property tax relief, even if it's temporary, that is a focus. Having the overhaul of education, or the continuation of the 200-year conversation for the overhaul of education. What I'm hearing in the Senate, and I'm not going to speak for Seth, I think you're going to have him on, or already
I'm
had
sure
him
we'll
on,
have him on
but
eventually.
He'll be able to
He
speak
won't escape.
a lot more. But the talk is more of, we're going to do this slowly. We're going to do this deliberately. We're not going to push something through that isn't fully formed. And this is one of the things that I've noticed, as an outsider coming into the legislature, but also as a lawyer coming into the legislature. So we have what's called a crossover, which is the end of next week, where bills have to be out of committee on either side of the chamber so that they can go to the other chamber. And I haven't seen exactly why this happens, but that's a number, it's 2.5 months essentially of time to do that. And I think about in my job as a lawyer, where we're dealing with a single case and it takes longer than that. And so if there's a challenge to any law in a court case, it takes longer than perhaps one side of the legislature even thought about that law to begin with. So I'm one who wants to go much more slowly with a lot of these things, but it seems to not be how it is. But what I am hearing, and which I'm heartened by, is that this legislative session is going much slower than others have in the past. So that doesn't behoove us well for how long we're going to be there. So we might be in there into the summer. So I'm hearing some grumbling on that. I'll see if I'm grumbling at that time. But I think that we're all taking this very seriously and very carefully. And although I was complaining about the governor's bill not coming quickly enough, to a certain degree, I'm very happy that they took their time. And I do have to say that I'll explain a little bit about how bills are made. Essentially, a legislator, perhaps the governor, will have some idea, and then there's a request to legislative council, which is a group of, I don't even know how many
20.
lawyers there are,
20
20,
lawyers, I think, yeah.
who are who work miracles, where they'll take an idea that might be harebrained. And I'm not talking about the education bill, but just in general, and they'll turn it into something that is a cohesive law that really could be put into effect. And they're quite amazing how they do it, and they are with us throughout the whole process. So I wanted to make sure that that's on record, because those folks are fantastic.
Absolutely.
But from my standpoint, I'm sort of outside looking in. But what I'm hearing on the Senate side is we're going to be looking at this closely, but it's going to take a number of years before there's really a complete overhaul. And I'll just throw out, I've been hearing 3 to 5 years. I saw a rough timeline that someone had put together. None of these are like proposals, but really thinking about it, not in we got to get this done right now, but as in we've got to start the process of figuring out how to get it done.
Well, and just meshing to go from however many districts are in the Southwest to just one. Think of all the business offices. Think of all the properties. Think of the different school district debts. I mean, all of that paperwork, all of that legality, just that alone is staggering to think about how all of those things become one. Which actually, that also brings up, part of what, another potential glitch, you go from 119 to 5, and now you have a 5-person school board on a district that goes from the Massachusetts border north of Rutland, and who are these who are these 5 people? And so clearly, local people are like, what if none of them like us in Arlington, and what if they want to phase us out? Well, I mean, so there's this idea. One of the ideas is that local control is getting sucked away from people. That as far as the money's going to come from the state and say, okay, it's a foundation formula. You get this many kids. Here's your money. Interesting, because didn't Brigham was originally over a foundation formula. So there's a million questions.
It seems like one of the drivers of this education proposal, though, was the dramatic increase in property tax rates last year.
That's it. Exactly.
And I suppose for that matter, the year before, and that really kind of pushed the sense that, hey, we've got to fix this. But I'm just wondering, isn't there a way we could come up with sort of a short-term solution to the property tax question, so that people don't feel like, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to afford to live here. Deal with that whole affordability mantra the governor speaks about a lot.
Yep.
And then take a little more time to kind of figure out, well, all right, if we are going to reconfigure the state and change how we're going to pay for things, let's take our time and do it right, rather than try and take a blowtorch to the whole thing
do it tomorrow,
and just move fast and break things.
And you probably know more about the details of this, but the short-term solution to the property tax is just that.
Yes.
It's short-term, and it's something in the long run will not be sustainable, and will end up right back where we were. And I don't know if there's a way to, and this is what I've asked different folks on the Senate side, is there a way to work on the foundation formula, get that in place before going into the governance factor of it? And what I've been hearing is you really can't do it that way. Without having some difference in governance, you wouldn't be able to have any sort of reduction in, I suppose, property taxes. I was about to say reduction in spending, but I think education in Vermont is expensive, and I think it's worth it. So I want to make sure that people aren't feeling the hit that folks have felt, and it's predictable in far better way, and equitable in a far better way. But you might know more about, just in terms of governments versus funding.
No, that sounds about right. That these things need to happen in tandem. But what's also interesting about the foundation formula, the base amount being $13,200, and plus for very rural, English language learners, et cetera. So the school's going to get more than just $13,200 per kid. And I know that who's the head of the board down there at Arlington, the tall guy, the trooper.
Oh, Todd Wilkins.
Todd Wilkins.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's like, hey, we're fine with that, but I've got people up at CVU saying we're going to lose 25% of our budget if that's all we get. So they're looking at losing $20 million.
Yeah, because off the top of my head, 13,000 or so per student sounds a lot less than numbers I've seen in recent years about what school districts have been looking at.
Right, right,
right,
You know,
right.
18, 19, 20,000 has been more the
Well,
range.
it's 13.2, and
Is the
then
base.
and then there's weight, which would be upwards of
20
al-
I think the
almost
number I heard was
almost
20,000
9,000 more. So yeah, it's over
20,700 would be like
Yeah.
the average.
Yeah.
Yeah. Per, because every school
Right.
around here has rural kids, has English
Yeah,
language learners,
yeah.
has kids
Yeah.
in poverty, all of those things. So,
Yeah.
so the, what
So I
what
think-
they
yeah.
get at the end will be a lot more than 13.
Yeah. So I think the real number is what you said was
20,700.
22,700. 20,700.
Okay. Well, we could talk about the education bill probably for
Forever.
a long time,
Yeah,
but
let's move
just
on.
want to hit on a few more things before we have to run here. And one of them, I guess I just wondered what your sense is of some of the talk that's coming out of Washington, D.C. around cutting back on federal grants and money coming into the state. I mean, Vermont, as I understand it, draws a lot of money from the federal government to help balance the state budget and finance a lot of other things. A lot of organizations, public, private, not-for-profits, rely on federal money. What are you guys making of that? Is it something we really ought to be legitimately scared about, or is it just we'll figure out a way to make this work?
Yeah.
Well,
you
we're
want first,
Vermonters.
Darren?
We'll always figure out how to make it work. And I never want to say anyone should be scared, but I think what we're seeing is chaos from Washington, and that's deliberate. But we are seeing, some cuts that have started to happen. Like in Bennington, I've seen a letter just regarding a trail project where it was $1 million that they received from VTrans. I don't know if there's anything more that's happened over the past few weeks, but it was, oh, I'm sorry, we're not going to have this anymore, so you don't get it. And there's a lot of different areas where they aren't able to access it for one moment. This might be some sort of agriculture grant, or it might be there's another number that I can't remember. So it's a lot of it's the uncertainty that is really the issue. What we've been trying to deal with is figuring out where that uncertainty is and maybe put in a few stopgaps. We've talked about this in the Agriculture Committee, especially we've talked to the Secretary of the Agency of Agriculture, and they're keeping a very close eye on what's available at any point. And I haven't heard of anything drastically being unavailable for agriculture at this point. We can talk about tariffs a little bit differently. But I do know that what had happened is with the most recent, and I think it passed the House, the Budget Adjustment Act. There was a part of that, and I don't know what degree each year there's money sort of like put in reserve, and I want to say it was 137 million that is essentially not allocated. That is for the purpose of, if there's federal money that isn't available, we can look towards that. So there have been some steps taken in place to just see, are there ways that we can shore up different folks? But beyond that, it's really just the chaos of it. And part of what I would say to folks is, as this comes about, as the money's not available to you, reach out to us, or reach out to the agency that you might be working with, and make sure they know exactly what it is and exactly what it's for, and we can try to do something. But I think a lot of it is hopefully, and our federal delegation has been very strong and very vocal about how important this is for Vermont to not be cut off, for the federal government to abide by their agreements. These aren't handouts. This isn't something more. This is something that they've agreed to, and they have to abide by their word. Unfortunately, we know who's in the Oval Office right now.
Well, and I want to say, I think about 30% of Vermont's budget is federal monies.
30% of the
Yeah, we had numbers, and I don't have them in
It's
front
about
of me.
30.
But
I want to say
yeah.
about 30% of our budget.
we have
comes
about a
from,
$6 billion state budget. This is the
and
the full.
30%. So,
Yeah.
so really, and I know what's going on right now in Montpelier is that the people who are in the know are in battle stations right now, whether it's joint fiscal or the other people putting together the hypotheticals.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
this money doesn't come through, what do we do? So it's not like people are sitting up there, going,
No,
oh God,
yeah.
we'll just wait and see what happens. They literally are in battle stations and figuring out hypotheticals. If this money doesn't come through, then this, then this, then this. So very smart people have been working on this now for weeks.
And I should mention specifically our Attorney General, Charity Clark. They have been, essentially at battle stations. And another thing that we've done, the Budget Adjustment Act, which is just a budget bill, we're making sure that the Attorney General has another position in the Solicitor General's office just for the purpose of essentially fighting the Trump administration. But I think for the most part, that would be a lot of, if you're going to be cutting off something that you've agreed to, they're going to bring it to court. And I'm a lawyer. I'm a big believer in the courts, and I am a big believer in our Vermont courts, especially the state courts, but our federal judges as well. I mean, they're Vermonters. They know Vermont, and so they're going to be looking at this in a way that's, I think, going to be, well, as helpful as it can be. But that's a big thing. Our Attorney General is, she has her eye on it.
Because these are congressionally appropriated funds. I mean, it's not,
exactly.
This is like statutorily.
Yes.
Yep.
To say that, well, this agency or this program or whatever is not going to be getting the $5, $6, $7, $8 million you got last year, isn't that sort of like illegal?
And there have been some court successes. How far they'll go, we'll see. But
right.
Well, in the few minutes we have left here, I just wanted to also ask you about some relatively breaking news, at least as of today, as we're sitting here. Yesterday, 25% tariffs were put on Canadian goods coming into the United States and into Vermont, and Canada's Vermont's largest trading partner. Have you been hearing any concerns from folks up in Montpelier about what this could mean for the state's economy if those are longer lasting than, let's say, a week or two, which I guess is always a possibility that things could change quickly.
Yeah.
But assuming that they hang around for a while, that is going to drive up the cost of things like lumber and fertilizer and probably deter a lot of Canadian visitors who might have come down to Vermont for a vacation.
Right.
Say, well, maybe I'll go to Nova Scotia instead.
Isn't it funny? Like the national and local elections were all about affordability last November, and it seems insane that now in Shaw's eggs are $10 a dozen, and that now the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and we will see price increases. So it just is running counter to everything that we might have imagined happening, that prices will actually be going up. And as I had said earlier, I have a good acquaintance who owns Tractor Supply stores in New York State, and she said it right up front, this is going to hurt our farmers. And she deals with big farmers over New York State and upstate, but I'm sure that our big farms here in Vermont are going to be hurt as well by a lot of the equipment that they get from Canada.
And on the Agriculture Committee, I'm sure you've heard an earful already too about that.
Yes, there's and I'm learning a lot of this, but there's a deep concern about especially the price of agricultural inputs, which is a new term I'm learning. That inputs are fertilizer, but the equipment as well being something that'll harm the agriculture sector in Vermont. And it's interesting, you brought up tourism. So, and we had heard recently, a $4 billion industry in Vermont. We also heard recently agriculture, $4 billion industry in Vermont. So they're essentially neck and neck in how important they are to the state. And one of the things we've been talking about in our committee is that agriculture is essential to Vermont tourism. It's on all of our advertising. You've got your red barn, you've got your field, you've got your cow, and that's what draws folks to Vermont. So making that less affordable, cutting into our farms, is something that's going to hurt Vermont deeply, and we've been talking about that a lot. It's a big concern, but one thing that I did see in Montpelier is that Canada came down. There was a Canadian delegate making clear that they are still a partner with us And so keeping that relationship there, I think, I know our governor's behind it, and so. We heard from the president, you know what, it's going to be tough for a little while. Well, that's not good enough. And in Montpelier, we're really trying to figure out how to make it so that we can weather this storm, along with all the other storms we've been weathering for the past few years.
Mm. I mean, this too is such an interesting thing because I find myself wondering, once that's a certain level of trust is broken around this, and even though we can look back on, well, centuries, I guess, of cooperation and having one of the most unguarded borders in the world anywhere. If it was the other way around, we'd probably be thinking, okay, well, when the other guys come to their senses, and this is history, do I trust them that they wouldn't do it again sometime?
Yeah.
I think that'll be interesting to see if this is repairable relatively quickly, or is something that just lasts much longer.
Yep.
But well, I guess we're going to have to leave it there for today. Yeah. But gentlemen, thank you again for making the time for being here. Really pleased to have Senator Rob Plunkett, who represents Bennington County, along with Mr. Bongartz, former representative.
Also Londonderry, also Wilmington.
Right,
also
right.
Stratton,
I keep on forgetting.
Also
That's
Somerset.
right.
I will not forget that.
Over the mountain.
They can, really.
Yeah.
And Representative Rob Hunter represents the Bennington 4 District. It's Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, and a part of Sunderland.
Yes.
So thank you both for bringing us up to speed on what's going on under the Golden Dome up in Montpelier. And probably have to have you back again at some point after the session's over to give us the final report.
Wrap up.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you so much.
All
Thank
right.
you.
And thanks to all of you who've been with us today. Hope you found the show interesting. We'll see you again next time. Thank you very much.